Welcome everybody to another Eye of the Serpent pick a card reading. Today's reading is all about your particular unique types of intelligence, and I use the word types advisedly because we often talk about different sorts of intelligence. We talk about IQ, we talk about EQ or emotional intelligence. There's also common sense, street smarts, gut instinct, all of those sorts of things, plus a kind of almost spiritual EQ/IQ as well too, in terms of connecting to our inner self and also to the divine. So there are many ways that we can be intelligent, and one of the reasons that I wanted to do this reading is because we often get caught in the trap of just very conventional ideas of intelligence. For many years you were judged just by what your school marks or your university or college marks might be, for instance. Then Daniel Goleman and others brought in the concept of EQ, emotional intelligence, and how that was just as important, if not more important, to success, happiness, and so forth. And the work that people have done in the spiritual community and general lifestyle community also looks at other ways that we can be intelligent. You can look at it through the prism of the different elements, so sort of like mental and sort of swords type energy like you would get in a tarot pack, or material energy like you would get with pentacles and so forth. There are so many different ways to be intelligent. And so there are almost as many as there are people, really. And so we want to celebrate that and look at what are your particular strengths, how do they manifest, how can you best use them, and are there any blind spots or areas where you either need to particularly use one type over another, or where you could develop something more. Because intelligence is really almost like a muscle that you can develop as well. So being aware of those sort of things can help you in rounding all of that out. So I have 4 different readings to choose from. You're of course welcome to go to more than one if you feel drawn to more than one. What I've done to try and help you in tuning in to the right reading is that I've chosen the Magician card from 4 different tarot packs. So the tarot pack represented in each is the main tarot pack that I will use, but you will see there's a couple of other tarots that I will use across all the readings for various aspects, because we're going to be looking at the overall map of your intelligence, and then we're going to be looking at it in relation to sort of career, in relation to relationships and connections with others, and then in relation to your lifestyle and your spirituality. So we're going to be looking at all those different areas. So it's going to be fairly detailed, and I hope enlightening and helpful. I've used the Magician card from each of the tarot packs that will be the dominant pack in that particular reading, because I think the Magician represents bringing all the different types of intelligence and skill together and working out then how to use them. So it seemed to me to be the best motif. So for reading number 1, pile number 1, I'm using the Magician from the White Fly Tarot. For reading number 2, I'm using the Magician card here from the Venetian Carnival Tarot. For reading number 3, I'm using the Magician card from the Joy Seeker Tarot. And for reading number 4, I have the Magician card from the Cute and Creepy Tarot. So hopefully the colour, the energy, what you know of these particular decks if you're familiar with them, the number if that's the way you choose, whatever it is will help you draw to the right reading for you. And as I said, if you feel like going to more than one, by all means do that. When you know what reading or readings you do want to go to, the timestamps as always will be in the description box below, and I'll see you there. Welcome pile 1 to your reading. So this is to give us a bit of an overview of your different types of intelligence at the moment, and then we will start to drill into that more with the tarot around what that is telling us about the key core areas of your types of intelligence and how they are helping or limiting you now. And what I didn't say in the introduction quite deliberately is part of the choice with the tarot decks for the primary tarot deck that we're using, and in this case it's the White Fly Tarot, was that I felt with each of these tarot decks they had a predominant energy for this sort of reading. So I always feel with the White Fly Tarot, with its kind of fantastical imagery, it feels to me to be a very air dominated tarot. It feels very much something of the mind, of the imagination. So that told me, even by you choosing this pile, that you are someone who has a very sharp mind, a very innovative and new mind, and probably process a lot through the mental realm. So your IQ is likely to be very high. And then we'll also look at EQ and how you process that on a sort of material level. And that has sort of borne out a bit with, I think, the primary card that has come here. So I had 3 cards from the Dreams of Gaia Tarot as well to have a look at what I think the energies were in the balance. And what's interesting here is the most developed in a way card here is the Air card. And this is the 12 of air, so in the Dreams of Gaia Tarot, and that is the scribe. So it is someone who is very intellectual, someone who is often a person of letters, someone who would be very good at documenting, recording, planning, all of those sort of things. Could be a scientist, could be a philosopher, could be a lawyer, could be anything at all, in fact, that is about the written word or about research and about detail. Some of you may be very creative with the sun energy there. So you may, in fact, instead of taking a scientific or a conventional mathematical, scientific, legal, that kind of IQ type area, it may be channeled through creativity for you potentially. Or you may have creative flashes of insight around things that you have a lot of grounding in. You definitely value things that are developed over time and the wisdom of age and the wisdom of time. You have a very keen sense of that, of the right progression of events and so forth. So you see things within more specific intellectual, philosophical frameworks, and mathematical, I would say as well too, is a strength of yours, definitely. What is interesting is that there is also in you the EQ side of things around hope and abundance and so forth, but you are starting to recognize the importance of that. Plus you are starting to recognize the importance of the practical application. And the reason I say that is that the 2 other cards here are both aces. Aces are blessings, so they definitely say you have the ability, but it definitely looks to me as though you have primarily channeled most of your understanding of the world through your mind. But you're starting to have a sense, it's almost like an itch under your skin, about the emotional importance of things, particularly from the creative energy and the material things, because this is water or cups and this is earth. So there is a sense of you starting to look at new horizons, new opportunities where you can bring this great deal of learning. You're definitely someone who would learn very quickly, who probably has a highly retentive memory, who can delve into the detail, get to the core of things very easily. But you're really starting to recognize now that to take your intelligence and your capacity to the next level, you've got to start to really balance and use those skills as well too. Because certainly here, with animals, I have a sense of something very material, something in the natural world. If you are, say, a scientist, it may have been that you were more into the kind of esoteric sort of sciences, but you're now starting to think about their practical application on the environment in some way. If that's not the case, it may be that part of your EQ and your practical grounding could come from your relationship with animals. So having a pet or working with animals might be something that you're using to bring that blessing energy through, but to bring it to the same level of trust. It's not really about maturity, it's about trust. You trust your mind, you trust your IQ, you trust the things that you've learned, more possibly than you trust your inner sort of direction emotionally and even, from your body. You have a very strong sense of what is refined, what is good, what has been developed, and so forth. You would have exquisite taste, I think. You would be someone who would present themselves extremely well. I think you're very, very well respected for your IQ in particular, for your intelligence, for the degree of knowledge that you bring to anything. But there is more to you than that. It's not just the recording of what has been. You are also meant to be using your various forms of intelligence to bring in the new. But you don't rate it as much in yourself at the moment. You kind of have a sense that your hopeful side, your EQ side, is a little bit more immature than your scientific, I can work out all the patterns type of side. So this is saying you have all the key sort of intelligences. If you look at those 4 together, that's air, fire, water and earth. So there is a balance, but there is definitely, I think, number one, processing through the intellect, and secondly, through creative or ambitious energy. I think, in fact, for many of you, these two things are connected. I think that many of you have done really well. You've excelled at school or in some form of academic study or in some form of research or writing or something like that. And that's one of the reasons why it's more developed than the others, because you were precocious, I would say. And maybe you've had parental figures around you who have instilled in you the importance of, conservative, conventional learning and so forth. But there is something new in you as well too. Your intelligence are wanting to get more in balance at this point in time. So I suspect that there will be a sort of push towards the emotional, the EQ, and the sort of lifestyle and practical side of things. So it will be interesting to see what we get as we go further through the reading. But let's ask the tarot that you chose, firstly, for any more detail about your type of intelligence. What is it that, or types of intelligence, what are the key elements that really stand out and can tell us something about how you use that in the world? Okay, so this is interesting. I think I'm going to go to this first. I'm going to go look at these two cards, because the Eight of Pentacles, I mean, that could be picking up stuff around the earth, but I actually think the Eight of Pentacles is traditionally a card about higher learning, and I think you are all over higher learning. You are somebody who would be naturally very, very good at that in whatever areas that interest you. You would have done what you needed to do in that space. And I think this is what Spirit is saying here. With Strength reversed, there is a risk for you if you only sit in your mind and you only sit in the accepted traditional ways of learning and being sort of lionized in the world. You could, in fact, not get the blessings that are going on with the other parts of what wants to be born in you. Somewhere along the way, you made a pragmatic decision, and it possibly was around who you would connect with and what was the foundations of your life. For many of you, you might be relatively early in your careers or just starting to establish yourself in a career, or you might have just finished some form of education and you've got your first sort of chance. And it does look as though some of the creativity has been given away to the structure of what you're dealing with and what you want to build, and you're not necessarily feeling the joy in what you could do. There is something that's affecting, I think, your hope. So maybe you're in an environment that isn't really allowing you to explore those other areas. It very much wants you to be this. You could be an amazing computer programmer, for instance, in an organization, and there is something really creative about you, and there's almost like an application or something you could develop that was also emotionally resonant and that was very practical, but it's almost as though there is a set of products that you're meant to do, and you're feeling at the moment a little bit constrained if that's the case. It's just an example of this sort of energy. What it's really telling me is, again, that there's almost a process through which you go, and you've tended to always go through the mind, but Spirit is saying here that you've almost oversaturated that side of things. You're moving, I think, firstly into the practical. So you move from the mind into the practical sense. So when we get to that part of the reading, it'll be interesting to see what advice Spirit has for you. But Spirit is saying don't lose what is joyous. Don't lose what is hopeful, because there's something spiritual in this for this. In terms of your spiritual EQ, because of the blessings that we see there and your very sharp mind, if you retain the sense of joy and hope, then you can bring in the abundance. You can actually manifest. So there's a manifestation aspect of this to your type of intelligence. But if you don't have that joy and that hope, then you will limit yourself. And that's all this is really saying. You're limiting yourself to being an extremely smart, extremely well-accomplished version of what already has been, whereas there is such a chance here for you to do something new and bring something new in. So let's ask Spirit for just a little bit more advice on how to unlock, I think, the potential of the sort of emotional intelligence and the sort of practical intelligence to help you accelerate that to the degree that you have the intellectual intelligence. Okay, it's definitely saying there is a there is a process for you. Although we have two aces here, it's saying that what would happen is you move first to that and then you're going to get to enjoying things. I do think you're very achievement oriented. I suspect you come from a family that's very achievement oriented, or from some sort of discipline, academic discipline that requires practical application. So this feels again a bit like a scientist who has all the theory and is now putting that through testing the hypothesis and so forth. So there's definitely a moving towards what is practical, what is the kind of common sense side of things. So it'll pick up when we're looking at career, I think, and it'll pick up when we're looking at lifestyle. So that's probably the direction to go to first, because after that you can start to really recalibrate and work out what it is that you want. Once you've really explored both your mind and what the practical world is offering you, then you can decide where you want to put your emotional energy. It's definitely saying there are some things that you've been working on that maybe aren't going to come to full fruition. And I think it's partly because it is saying that this process, you hadn't gone through this process, you just kind of written it all out as a plan, and it was very precise, but it wasn't taking into account some of the material impacts. And I'm getting, for some of you, blocks around time. Like you are precocious, that's, I think, and that can be a wonderful thing, but it can equally be something that like makes you feel really impatient. And so I think there was almost, it's a sense here of a block on time being put on what you could do and so forth. And some of what you develop and have developed so far, you'll probably let go of once you realize what you really want to manifest on your own and what you really care about. So you've got to go through the journey from the Ace of Pentacles to the Page at the very least to really understand what it is that you want to do. Then you can do a similar journey, I think, from the Ace of Cups. Like, what does that then mean to you emotionally, so that you feel like you can go towards Jupiter and abundance. So there's a process for you. You have all the intelligences, but because you have put a premium on one, you now need to go through with almost that same precision that is natural to your mind, but doing it on that kind of business, common sense, career level, and then deciding what is it that you really want to manifest, what blessings do you really want to have. So some other cards that were under the tarot card that you chose to come here are looking at various aspects. So we're going to start off firstly looking at career. So I'm using a couple of cards from the business class tarot because to me it has a different way of looking at very practical matters. So this is going to be very important to you because this is part of this journey we're talking about. I'm also using a career and money oracle card and a career card from the Heart Code Oracles, just to give us a little bit more understanding of your particular intelligence in relation to these sorts of things. This says leadership, in case it's hard to see. Okay, so what this is saying is that you are at the moment, you do not put as much attention on what would make you happy and on the emotional intelligence and the brand side of things. If this was looking at your intelligence for running a business, it would say that that lack of maturity on the emotional areas might be affecting either the culture that you were leading if you were a leader, or it might be affecting how engaged people are in what you're doing and what you're creating. So it is definitely saying there is something still in what you've been doing that can give you joy, but you haven't been paying that attention, but under the surface it's niggling at you. So your EQ knows there's something in the design, I think, something in the creative energy that you're doing. It's very precise. Again, it's picking up that you are very precise, that you're not going to have many flaws, and that's good because you're a perfectionist. You're not going to have many flaws in the design of anything that you do. It's going to be really robust. It's going to be really well done. And you are going to be seen as a leader in bringing in sort of new things on that level. That's why it's important for you to really start to focus on both your practical intelligence and your emotional intelligence, because you're all over the design of things. That's not a problem. But because of that perfectionist nature and the fact that you're comfortable in the designer space, you may hesitate to finally bring something forward and show it to people. It might never feel good enough. You know, you might never think it's going to be enough to really engage people, and you may not want to take the leadership role. You might be wanting to sit in the designer space. So there may be something there around understanding developing those other types of your intelligence so that you can bring it all together in the same way that you bring a plan together or you bring the design of what you do together. So let's have a look at a couple of cards about relationships. So this is picking up the EQ side of things. So this says judgment. So we have antisocial and judgment. So yeah, there's something in you. I don't believe it's that you lack EQ. I mean, nobody really lacks EQ. They just may not focus on it as much. And it looks as though something has made you feel that you like to just work on your own rather than with others. And it may well be because you were precocious. I'm getting that some of you were very, very smart at school and you mightn't have had a great time as a result of that from your peers, the other kids at school and so forth. You do like to because you're a perfectionist and because you live so much in your mind, you don't necessarily put as much store on the emotional side of things. That's why if you were in a business or something like that, the brand would be an issue. So it is something to think about, because if you want to trigger those other types of intelligence, you need to come a little bit out from behind just the theory and a little bit out from behind judgment. So you've either been judged in a way that has made you separate, like you might have, as I say, been judged as someone who's incredibly smart but not necessarily socially comfortable. And so you've kind of really amped up that type of intelligence because it feels easy and because it's what you do really well. And it's almost like you're trying to compensate for everything else. But there's something you want to design, bring into being that will be emotionally resonant and will touch other people and will give you back that sense of hope. It's just that you need to understand how these things have activated for you. And I think it might be why it's saying that comes first. I think this is saying that you need to meditate on this a bit. You need to think about what's going on emotionally for you, what's happening in your EQ. So say it's not that you don't have it, but why have you almost put it to the side? Because and that may be why you need to kind of make something practical first so you feel confident to go into that space. But remember, you have a blessing there. It's not going to be as hard as you think, but it really is important to work out what are the patterns that made you live so much in your mind. Okay, so what we're also going to have a look at is some cards around lifestyle and well-being and also spiritual energy. So this is to pick up the kind of almost combined energies of all of the areas. What else can we learn about your intelligence and about the things that you can focus on to get the most out of it? So we have reputation. We have well-being. And we have kitchen magic. Okay, so reputation. So there's something in this around EQ and also I think around why you have really focused in on the intellectual side of things. It has to do with your reputation. I do believe you will have developed a reputation over your life for being very, very smart in the intellectual, academic, scientific, technological, something like that space. And there is a lot more to you than just that reputation. This is why we've got the well-being. This is why it's saying that you need to start to not just rely on that and what got you there, but it's what can you now design and do, bringing together the other elements that make you feel happier with what you're doing, that make it alchemical. And I feel like the kitchen magic thing there is around alchemy. It's around bringing it all together because you do have the capacity to do that. You do have all the types of intelligence. It's just that you have really overemphasized one at the expense of the others. I think because of something you went through at school or at college or at university or even early in your career or in your family, there's something where you have focused on where you could get the reputation, but you have been sacrificing how far you could go with this. With that alchemy kind of card, that does suggest for some of you that if it's in the scientific space, it could be looking at natural remedies and so forth. It could be also looking at for your well-being, that the nourishment that you give to your body, the herbs and the aromatherapy and things like that might all help you come to a space where you can really access the hope. Because I just feel like you've kind of put it to the side. Not that you don't have the EQ, but it's like you don't trust it in yourself in the way that you do your mind. Okay, so if we've ascertained where your key intelligence focus is, what I want to do is to close out with 3 different oracles that are, one is first just an affirmation, one is a kind of energy level thing to give you some advice, and the last is a humorous sometimes humorous oracle coming from musicians of the ages, because I think music brings all the different types of intelligence together. So firstly, let's have a look at some affirmations, a couple of affirmations for you to get this balance right so that you unlock the promise of your own emotional intelligence and practical and spiritual kind of magic. It's time to be your own guide. Oh, it's all about timing. So there's something about time here. So it's time to be your own guide, but what you want is coming to you in divine timing. I think this is basically saying that you, as I say, you have a really strong sense of time. You have a really good sense of timing. And if you think about it, that is both practical and emotionally acute. That's why it's saying you don't lack these things. It's just that you haven't credited them to the degree that you actually have them. Beyond that, your hope and your abundance will come to you in divine timing. But once you've been your own guide, once you've started to look at what timing means across all the various types of intelligence, not just the one that you feel most able to control. Okay, let's see the energetic advice for you, pile 1. Dreams and ascension. Okay, so that's definitely telling me that the spiritual side of things, which I think brings it all together for you, it makes you the magician, like the card at the very beginning with when you did the choice of pile. I think that when you bring that all together and you own those other parts of you, rather than making them the poor relations that you kind of shun while you focus on what you think has got you your reputation, then you bring your dreams into being, you ascend sort of spiritually, you actually bring that energy out and you unlock the blessings of the 2 aces. So, and it may suggest for you that some of the inspiration for that will be divinely guided and it will come via dreams. So pay attention to your dreams. Pay attention in particular what they're telling you on an earthy level and an emotional level, because that's where the real growth opportunity is for you. Your mind will look after itself. You don't have to worry about that. And your creativity will as well too, because you are a designer and you had that sun energy as well at the beginning. Okay, so to finish off, as I say, I like to use an oracle that's a little bit humorous, so it just might be funny or it might be very profound. It sort of depends what Spirit wants to say right at this point. And so it's musicians from various periods in history, and it's what their advice to you is. And so this is really to unlock all your particular types of intelligence. Wow, and you've got John Lennon. So there was a visionary who was very philosophically strong if you think about it, but ultimately found his real creativity when he connected to his heart and to political causes. So I do think there's something in that as a particular archetype for you. The advice that he has is not everything you see is a mirage, not everything you hear is a lie. So there's something, again, you rely on your incredibly smart mind because it hasn't sort of steered you wrong. I suspect emotionally and to some degree sometimes around practical things, you might have found the information you got was not as clear as what you get when you do your research and you sit in your intellect. But as he says, not everything you see is a mirage, not everything you hear is a lie. He says, if you enjoy wasting time, then it isn't wasted. So don't think of the other types of your intelligence as waste. Think of them as things you can enjoy, that bring you hope, that can bring in abundance. And lastly, peace is the only thing worth hoping for, which I think connects to whatever's going to come through your dreams, whatever's trying to ascend in you. So there is a purpose to this. That's why you've got a double blessing. But you really do need to rate yourself more beyond just your intellect, because you do have what you need. You've just put it in the shade. So I hope that resonates for you, pile 1, and I hope it was helpful. I hope it was enjoyable, and if so, please like the video and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And if this does sort of strike any thoughts in you, I would love to hear about them in the comments. Otherwise, I hope to see you in future readings. Welcome, pile 2, to your reading. So these first cards are meant to give us a bit of a sense about the sort of balance of your various types of intelligence, and we'll then drill into that more with tarot and also with some other cards that were under the magician card that brought you to this reading. What I deliberately didn't say in the introduction is that the choice of decks for the main part of the reading, so where the magician card came from, were meant to give me a sense of a predominant type of intelligence, a particular strength of yours. And you chose the Venetian Carnival Tarot, which to me always feels very emotional. It feels like very strong EQ, relationship based, and getting to the mystery of things. So a little bit sort of mysterious, spiritual as well. The interesting things about this particular map in relation to that is that I think that is probably a primary type of your intelligence, but I think experience has made you not trust it or not want to look at it. You're deeply spiritual, and I think that part of one of your real geniuses is your spiritual connection, but you have suffered to some degree for it. You're very deep in your soul, and the moon is an emotional card, so your soul connects emotionally. But the interesting thing is we also got Neptune for sacrifice, so there's some sort of sacrifice here. And we look up here at the Dreams of Gaia Tarot, and this card here is all about the learning and experience that you get from your own life. And we have the Five of Swords, or the Five of Air, which suggests to me that you also want to deny anything that is taught to you. So I suspect you were very smart at school and so forth, but I think that you did not accept a lot of it. I think that you may have felt a lot of what you were taught was lies. You may have come through a particular type of career, a particular type of schooling, even things that you had in your family you felt were not honest, and often brought you into conflict with your own creative intelligence, with the the Six of Fire there. So in this particular pack, the Six of Fire is about sort of like kind of disputes, negotiation, and so forth. So there's definitely a sense where something has happened in your life where you've gone, I'm going to tread my own path, and you very much connected to what was your soul and what that means for your fortune. And the heart chakra is strongly being shown here with all the green energy that we have here. But we also have periwinkle, which is chilled, frigid, and frozen. And I feel like there is something here where you have been hurt emotionally. And so I think that I'm getting that for some of you, for instance, a good example of this would have been a child who was very clear and could see the truth in a family that had lots of dysfunctional dynamics. And you may well have tried to speak your truth, but you were chilled, you were shut down. So there's a side of you that doesn't really want to use that enormous EQ you have because it's been painful. You'd rather be on your own. You'd rather have your own path than connect to others, because others, there are memories. You have an amazing memory, and I suspect a memory from past lives as well. The memory also would have made you very, very good at school. So for all that I feel that you have rejected a lot of your early learning and the just intellectual, just accepted way of doing things type of path, I do think that you're probably very good at it. So you have a high IQ, I would say, but I don't think you trust it. And I think you have high EQ, but I don't think you trust it. You made a decision to separate from the accepted ways of looking at the world and the accepted ways of relating to people because of these memories, and you're saying, I'm out on my own path. And to that degree, the fire energy there, the creativity comes through. And you've said, if I have to be in a desert, if I have to be on my own, I will do it. I'm just me and my breath and my soul. And if I have to sacrifice for it, I will. This is a typical sort of reading that could come for someone who ended up renouncing most of the material world and went into some sort of spiritual practice, for instance, became a Tibetan monk or something like that. The interesting thing, however, is you also do have a strong capacity for the law of attraction. So the spiritual side of things for you is there, and you are attracted to other people and you do want relationship, but you've kind of chilled it. So it feels to me like you have all the different types of intelligences, but sometimes having had them when you were young, particularly about seeing the way through lies and seeing the way through emotional issues, you've suffered for that, you've sacrificed for that, so you have separated yourself out. So it's interesting that you were drawn to the pack that is about emotion. I think that is saying that underneath everything, your real strength is your emotional intelligence. It's very, very, very strong, but you are afraid of it, or you don't trust it, or other people have shunned you for it. There's something in your memory that needs to be cleared to really open it up. So let's use the Venetian Carnival Tarot and let's have a look at what's going on at the moment around your EQ, your IQ, your spiritual intelligence, all of those sort of things. Any other information that Spirit can give about at the moment, and then we'll ask for some advice about, I think, how to unlock the EQ and use it again, because I think you have it, but how to use it again in a way that you don't feel is going to isolate you or hurt you. Okay, so we've got quite a lot of swords energy there. So I think that you do, for all that, I think you have shunned in some senses the theoretic and the academic and so forth, all of those sorts of ways of testing intelligence and so forth. You're actually very, very developed in that. You're smart. You would do well on an IQ test, for instance. But you've used it as part of your chilling energy. What this is saying is that the worst of that is over. Whatever it is more in your memory, and you need to understand that it's more in your memory. Don't give your memory form literally here, because you can, because you do have that capacity, and because of the emotional intelligence, you could replicate patterns because of the form that you give to memory. If you understand that the worst of the pain, whatever it was, is over, and you are more in control of your emotions than you think. The Chariot is typically a card of moving forward quickly and being able to manage conflicting emotions. That's primarily what it's about, or between the head and the heart. It's about being in control of that. Having been through the worst of whatever this unfair thing was, I would say, it's time to be more emotionally happy and to turn around this Ace of Swords here to make your mind work for you, not against you. I mean, it literally has a feeling of someone who is, every time you would be getting to the point of starting to move forward, you could almost literally cut yourself off with the Ace of Swords reversed, so that you don't go down a particular line because you feel thinking about it is going to hurt you in some way. This is saying the worst of that is done. You are more in control of what you can do than you think. This journey you've been on, you haven't done the wrong thing, Pile 2, because being on your own journey and being authentic to your own journey is the way to get the wisdom to be able to heal the wounds around this and to be able to accept those parts of yourself. So let's ask Spirit for a little bit more advice about how to do that. Because it's kind of easier said than done. You know, if I sort of go, oh, well, you know, like the worst is over, it's fine, you know, allow yourself to feel. You have to feel that yourself before you can do it. And I think the key may be in your spirituality and your spiritual practice and what you focus on and what you try and attract. But we'll just see what else Spirit wants to say. Okay. I think Spirit is saying you do need to let certain cycles complete with the world reversed. And some of that has to do with injustice. So it's saying it again, you know, like just get out of that sort of pattern of going round and round and round in circles. There will be the right people for you, the right connections, and a cause of celebration for you once you reconnect. Because this is very much a card of connection. So it's allowing that sort of emotional side to defrost. I mean, this feels like defrosting so that you can have the warmth of the Four of Wands. So understand that even the way that you protected yourself emotionally is part of what is your EQ. You knew how to do it. And I think you were in situations where you had to do it. I don't mean this as a criticism, but you can find a better emotional connection with people if you allow those patterns to go into memory rather than continually forming them. And so, and I also feel with the world reversed that there is a sense of spirituality around this. It's about the cycles that continue and continue karmically if we don't address them, bring them up to the surface, heal them and let them go. So I do think for you, the way to your emotions is through your soul and through your sense of the numinous and the divine. So allowing it, thinking of it almost as a karmic cycle, and you now need to let that karmic cycle go, or cut certain bonds or cords that might be around you to release that energy. That allows that EQ to come up. And as I say, your EQ is actually going to prove to be your strongest thing. But it's because of that, and because being so clever with that has hurt you in some way, you're holding it down. If you let that through, you know, the sky's the limit. So let's have a look at some of the other aspects specifically. So I'm going to start firstly with things around what I would call sort of career, material, earthy, pentacles type of thing. So this is your kind of common sense manifestation intelligence. And I'm using the business class tarot, so it's a different tarot that really looks at things in terms of career, and then a couple of cards from other oracles that are around career. So firstly, the business class one, we have merger and product 4. With career we have recognition, and with the heart codes oracle we have denial. Okay, so I think for some of you this has been about childhood, or it might be a pattern that repeats. For others, you may not have had the recognition that you deserve for something. So some of you, this might have been coming, maybe you did have your heart and soul and your EQ in something you're doing in your career, and you didn't get the recognition, and you've gone, okay, that's not the way, I've got to sort of like strike out on my own, or I've got to do things in a particular way, and it's, like emotion doesn't get you anywhere. The interesting thing is that, and some of you, it may have literally been through some sort of organisational politics with merger there, but you have a strength there. Product 4 is a bit like the 4 of Wands, so it's again saying that there is the right sort of like inspiration, creativity, people around you. Once you actually use your EQ, and it gets through the conflict, like in an organisation, once you recognise that about yourself and stop denying it in yourself, you would be a brilliant person for taking organisations through change, through understanding cultural shifts, politics, any of those sorts of things. Again, as I say, you have a genius when it comes to EQ. It's just that you've suppressed it for some reason. So let's have a look at some relationship energy to particularly look into that EQ side of things. So we have safeguard, and we have disappointed. Yeah, this is the same pattern coming out. Something has happened around relationships, or it may have been, as I say, a pattern from childhood through to relationships, through to things at work, through to school, where you feel you had to safeguard yourself around relationship issues so that you didn't get disappointed. I didn't need it anyway. You have pushed that down. And yet, as I say, it's actually the point of your genius. If you can move away from it, complete those cycles, and start to use it to your advantage. So let's have a look at some well-being and lifestyle cards and spiritual cards that might also help you around the types of intelligence that you have. So around well-being, we have throat. So I think that is about your voice, having your voice, speaking your voice. You've gone on your own path. It's time to talk about it. Around lifestyle, we have obligation. So some of you may have felt obliged to your family, obliged to your school, obliged to your career. And some of that might have been why you safeguarded your emotional side of things, because you felt that it wasn't, you weren't able to get what you actually wanted out of it all to be heard. There is something about speaking here. I think if you have issues around your throat or around your vocal cords, it could be because your throat chakra is a little bit blocked. And then we have journey. Now, isn't that interesting? Because the journey there, this is definitely saying that there is, maybe it's a new workplace you'll eventually go to, maybe it's a different thing you'll study, maybe it's a different relationship, but you need to go on the journey that is you, but that is not as stitched up and denying of the sort of emotional intelligence that you have. It's a different journey, it's a different path, but it does require you to extricate yourself from patterns that I think you've created to safeguard yourself. So to close out and to finish, to give you some further sort of support, I want to use an affirmations deck, an energy deck, and then we're going to use a sometimes humorous deck with advice from musicians, because I think music brings together all the types of intelligence. So firstly, some affirmations for you, pile 2. Okay, don't squeeze a dream too tightly, it must breathe to live. So this may be a little bit of a clue as well. It may be that some of the things that have disappointed you and made you sort of like dislike the sort of like structure and patterns and academics of the world, or not want to feel too much about anything, is that things haven't worked out for some reason. You haven't yet been on the journey to bring that about. So there may be something there, and it's interesting that we've got breathe there, and we also had breathe under here, and that was part of your spiritual genius. You have a very strong spiritual intelligence, so remember that and breathe into your dream. And when you stop being normal, you see how amazing you are. See, this is the thing, I just think I think you've actually always been very unusual. And I think, in fact, your high EQ and your high spiritual connection is really unusual. And that's why you've hidden it. You felt like somehow that wasn't accepted, but it's time to own that in yourself, pile 2. Okay, let's see if there's some energetic advice from the Wisdom of the Sacred Bee Oracle to help you with that. The Inspiration and the Worker. Okay, all right. So I think there's a dual message to this. I think the first thing is that while you don't acknowledge your EQ and you kind of almost, I think, extricate even your spiritual stuff maybe from your career and those sort of things, then you will remain feeling like a worker, just kind of the grind of everything. That's why you need to go on this journey. You need to sort of really bring everything together. That creates the inspiration, because just being a worker and just dulling down all the other parts of your genius is going to be really dull and uninspiring. But allowing yourself to go from the inspiration of who you are first and allowing those other parts of your intelligence to sort of breathe and see the light of day will turn work into inspiration. And so you get to that point where they say, you know, if you love what you're doing, you never work a day in your life. So to finish off, I'm going to use the music oracles. As I said, this is sometimes just amusing. Sometimes it's very profound as well. So we'll see what comes up for you in terms of a musician icon and their advice for you around using all of your types of intelligence. Okay, that one flew out, so just wait for a second. Oh, well, okay. Dolly Parton, that's a bit different. She has fun though, she enjoys things, and she is unashamedly who she is. So that may be, I think, what the message is primarily. She says the higher the heels, the closer to heaven. So enjoy life. It's like you haven't enjoyed enough of life, pile 2. She says caution will get you nowhere, and that's absolutely right. That might be why this card flew out, because you've been cautious, and in doing it, you've actually dulled some of your own brilliance. And she says the most precious diamonds are sometimes disguised as rhinestones. So yes, sometimes the most precious parts of your intelligence you're disguising at this point. So you don't have to be Dolly Parton, but maybe a bit of a joy would be helpful. But I think that advice is actually very apposite for this particular reading. So there is so much more in you than you are allowing to come out. And I think if you just do start to do that and you credit your capacity to drive the chariot, so to speak, then your inspiration will really start to rise, and that spiritual intelligence will be enriched by your emotional intelligence that will then allow you to move forward. You don't have to be about the academics, actually. You're far too spiritual and emotionally resonant for that, which doesn't mean you're not intellectually smart, but I just feel that it's the emotional intelligence and the spiritual intelligence that are your particular genius. It's just that you're not crediting yourself enough for it. So I hope that resonates for you, pile 2, and I hope you enjoyed the reading. If so, please like the video and subscribe. And if you have any comments, I'd love to hear about in the comments. Otherwise, I hope to see you in future readings. Welcome, pile 3, to your reading. So one of the things I didn't say quite deliberately in the introduction was that the choice of tarot pack as the primary pack, the one that had the Magician card for these readings, was a bit of a sign to me about what might be the real primary intelligence genius that you have. And then I was going to look at these for how that then interacts and what the balance is with others and so forth, to really look at what your particular types of genius are. Now, the interesting thing is you chose the Joy Seeker Tarot, and to me, with its use of animals as the motifs, it feels very much like pentacles, grounded, earthy energy. So in terms of the types of intelligence I'm talking about here, it's the intelligence to be able to manifest, to be able to do things that are practical, a business sense, all of those sorts of things. And you definitely would have that because that's the choice that you've done. And it may even be the area that you feel most confident, but I actually suspect it's the area you don't realize. You don't actually credit the genius of how you take the other types of your intelligence and then you manifest them, because you're kind of all about the ideas and the inspiration and the feelings around things. And you kind of do things because you like almost the interplay of those different types of intelligence. And yet your real genius is in doing that, you bring things into manifest being. But you probably think, oh, this is more about my ambition. I'm very ambitious. I know what I want to do. I'm sort of going for things. I'm happy to end and begin with the 8th house. I can sort of move on when things aren't moving anymore. All of that is true. And you are very electric and fiery and so forth. But the choice of the Joy Seeker Tarot tells me that maybe that's the thing in this case that you're underestimating, but which you take as being all part of the process. The genius is the fact that you can bring it into being. And why I say that's a genius is that people can be incredibly inspired but never finish a creative project, for instance. They can be incredibly clever but never turn that into a business idea that makes them money. They can have amazing EQ and get on beautifully with everybody but never really apply it to their own life. Having that grounded, sensible sort of law of attraction, manifestation energy as your core thing that drew you to this, I think shows that that's there, but I don't think you've necessarily made the connection. And why I say that is that everything here is about every other type of intelligence. So there's a very strong side of you about your understanding of emotions and intellect and balancing them. You definitely understand how to do that. You see how your emotions bear on your intellect and vice versa. And you're very, very good at assessing situations, at reason, very, very clever. You'd be very, very good with logic, science, academia, any of that. You probably score incredibly well on things like IQ tests because that kind of structured assessment and reason is really, really strong in you, but it's not at the expense of your emotions. You know how to enjoy life. You feel really inspired, and that gives you that sort of sense of ambition or whatever, and you have that push through. This is actually the one point which picks up the kind of earth energy, and I'll get to it, but it is also connecting to that fiery sort of ambition as well. You're very unique, you're very different, and you know you're very different. You see yourself as the great creator. Things erupt out of you electrically. You're probably very spiritually connected, but in a kind of a psychic, electric, telepathic sort of level. That's part of why you're really good emotionally, because you really do read a room really well. You understand the energies that you're around, all of that sort of stuff, and you're comfortable in the sort of more spiritually challenging areas. You find them inspiring, you find them interesting, you find them to be a problem to solve. You're an amazing problem solver actually, but because you're so inspired. But you also do have with Salmon here that perseverance when you hit obstacles, and that's your real genius under everything. And you are incredibly inspired, emotionally clever, all of those sort of things, very intellectually clever. And I think you actually sometimes conflate your intelligence, your IQ with your inspiration and all of that sort of thing, which I think is just as much sort of spiritual and emotional as anything else. But you are very vibrant. You're a very vibrant person, but also one who's very, very clear about what you do. But at the end of the day, it's this practical persistence. And I think it's almost like your understanding of your strengths, all this, it's almost you take for granted the fact that then you just persevere through and so forth. And you do let go of things that aren't working. You don't have a problem with that. And you take everything else through, and you're very ambitious that you bring things into being. But I think you've underestimated how rare that is to actually have that capacity to manifest at that level. This is the map of a natural manifester in the true sense, in the sense of bringing all those energies together, and then it almost naturally happens coming out of it. But that is the real genius, because a lot of people have elements of it and it's a bit out of balance. You're not really out of balance, you just don't really understand what you have. So let's drill into that a little bit more with the Joy Seeker Tarot. Let's see what Spirit wants to tell you in more detail about your abilities and your intelligence. Okay, this one wanted to come out, so we'll put it out there. Okay, this is definitely emphasizing EQ and that material thing. It's interesting, one of the key cards, and the only one that's the right way up, is the Queen of Pentacles. This is why I'm saying that there is something very earthy and grounded about you, something able to manifest, something be able to see things through and so forth. And Spirit is definitely saying that is in many ways the most developed part of you. It's just that I don't think you recognize it and credit yourself with it. And I think it's because you're so caught up in the problem solving and the inspiration. You are someone who doesn't hang around in unhappy feelings for too long. You know how to process that and let it go. You don't feel alone for too long. You know how to connect with the right people, and if it isn't the right connection with the Two of Cups, you know how to let it go and so forth. You can see through anybody who's trying to pull the wool over your eyes so quickly it isn't funny. And it will happen to you sometimes, and it has happened to you sometimes. But your assessment of people and your capacity to reason, you could out-argue anyone. You would be an amazing person in a debate, all of that sort of thing. But again, it's because in the end of the day, there's a practical outcome for what you do. It is aimed towards practical outcomes. It's just that you enjoy the journey so much. You enjoy the debates when it happens. You enjoy the emotional highs and lows. You enjoy the inspiration and the precision and the thinking it through and the problem solving. There's a movie I saw years ago called With Honours, and there was a guy who was teaching somebody. I won't tell you the whole story. He was trying to teach him to sort of think outside of academia, and he basically sort of says something to the effect of, winners in a race don't win for, the fact that they want to win. They just love the race. And I think that's kind of who you are. That's why you become a winner. That's why you can manifest things and so forth. But it's also because you see through, lies at, 10 paces, and you will let go when you need to let go, and you know how to come out of, you don't stay down for very long. You may sometimes get depressed. I mean, we all do. But it's like your inspiration in your mind brings you out of that, because your mind is so nicely connected to your emotions. So let's ask Spirit for a little bit more advice, particularly in getting you to really understand where your real strength is. I mean, you have strengths across all the areas, but your real strength is in manifestation. So let's just see what Spirit wants to tell you about really maximizing that. Okay, so firstly we have two blessings with two aces there. So there's a new idea and there's a new option on a material level for you. And that could be in any aspect of your life. It could be around a relationship, it could be a career prospect, it could be something to study. But Spirit is saying you do need to liberate yourself from something that's holding you a bit back. And connecting with that, I think that it is suggesting there are some relationships around you which are not at your level, are not on the same page as you, are maybe trying to capture the lightning in a bottle that you are and use it for themselves. So the Spirit is saying to work out the way to liberate yourself from that, to allow these new energies to come in. And it is saying once you realize with your mind what you can manifest, then you really unlock the blessing of that. You get to the Queen of Pentacles really quickly. But it is sort of like it's the bit that you haven't yet really realized. So hopefully this reading will help. So let's have a look at the various other ways that your various types of intelligence could manifest. So we're going to start with career. So that, I think, is actually a good way that one can see manifestation. It's not the only way. It could be around relationships. It could be around creativity or whatever. But career is often a way where we see the practical outcomes of things. So let's see what else we can learn about your types of intelligence in that space. So I'm using the Business Class Tarot, which is a tarot that looks particularly at career type of matters, and then a couple of decks that look at career issues more generally. Okay. And we have self-worth there around the heart code oracles for career. Okay, so Data 7 is like the 7 of Swords, so it's interesting. It's definitely saying you can see through anything that's duplicitous. In this particular pack, you can sort of see some of the IT data banks are starting to go on fire. So I think that's you. You have a very strong instinct, a sixth sense almost, for when things are going to go wrong, and the problem-solving capacity to sort of fix that up, find it and deal with it quickly. And that is partly understanding when there are lies and other things around. So your assessment ability, your reasoning, your intellect is very strong, and there is nothing wrong with looking at that. But it's turning it into profit. So this is like the sun. It's again, this material thing. You're meant to materialize something. You're absolutely a genius manifester. You just have to understand it about yourself. And I'm kind of getting it's a weird thing, because it's not like you have to become obsessed with that, because if you become obsessed with it, the problem that you get is that you start to maybe lose the joy of the process. And that's partly what creates the genius of manifesting. But it is maybe looking at, don't hang around in an environment that isn't right for you, for instance, just because you like the problem solving and the debate. If it's not working and it's not going to bring you to the profit in whatever that means to you, move on. You've got so much you could do. And if you can change a situation, again, because of your high EQ and your high intellect, you're able to do change management around that extremely well. All of this is about your self-worth. You get your self-worth in your career and otherwise around that joy in doing these things and being, you probably are the smartest person in the room half the time. They talk about the smartest person in the room. You probably are. And there is a joy to that, but I do think Spirit's saying the best way to really use that as a genius is to use the manifestation side of things. We'll also look at relationships, but I do think your relationship emotional EQ is on point. It's not a problem. So if there is anything challenging in these, it may just be around some of these more tricky people that might be around you. So we'll see what energy we get. So we've got harmony and perplexed. Okay, so that suggests to me, you generally speaking, because of your high EQ, can be harmonious with most people. I think you'd probably get on with most people. Some people might be a bit intimidated by you though, and that might be partly why I have perplexed over here, because maybe sometimes you think everything's going swimmingly with a relationship, and then there's a kind of a spanner in the works and you're thinking like, what's going on? And then you go into the assessment side of things. I think in this case that's fine. I think it's really just understanding that sometimes other people aren't, they find that quicksilver approach that you have a bit sort of threatening or a bit intimidating. But on the other hand, I think that you do have the EQ to figure it out and bring things back to harmony. So let's have a look at lifestyle and spiritual intelligence. So around lifestyle, we have mirror. Around well-being, we have skin issues. And spiritually, we have conjure. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So that's interesting. I'm getting something quite strong here. That capacity, that brilliant mind, the EQ and the manifestation thing, you can conjure both good and bad. I think that's maybe the subtext around this, is why it's important to think about the material outcome, the genius you have for manifestation. You can conjure skin issues if you're worried and you're in disharmony, for instance. You could conjure people who were mirroring you, where the issues emotionally might be people who want to mimic you rather than relate to you and so forth. That's why it's important for you to understand the power of your manifestation ability, because everything that you do using, as I say, this quicksilver mind, this EQ and this inspirational energy and spiritual energy is conjuring something. And your high degree of just rushing in and doing it with Aries and the way that you're trying to create yourself, your own creation, you are conjuring things with that, and you need to really think about what are the material outcomes, because you are able to do it. Okay. So to help you with all of that, bringing that all together, I'm going to use a couple of decks, an affirmation deck and then an energy deck, and then we're going to finish off with a card from the music oracles, because I think musicians bring a whole range of different types of intelligence together, so it's a sort of a fun way to finish the reading. So firstly, a couple of affirmations for you. Trust your heart, use your head, shine your light, especially when it's dark. So I think that is saying that you do this, because as I say, it looked like that was a fun, but I think there's a secondary element to that. Part of using your head is understanding all the elements that you need to bring into being. And because of your brilliance, you are going to sometimes be in sort of sticky, strange situations. I think many of you will get drawn to competitive, combative, political type of environments, that sort of thing. It is important to shine your light because of how much you can conjure things, particularly if something is, there's a problem to solve. Shine the light on it. Okay, let's look at some energy from the Wisdom of the Sacred Bee Oracle. Got observer and innovation. So you are an observer. This is part of it, actually. You can't just be an observer on your own life. I mean, in a weird way, I think you do that as well too. It's almost like because things generally work out for you, you manifest things well and so forth. Though, as I say, you can manifest the opposite of good if you start to sort of focus on that. There's almost a part where you detach from all of it. It's just a game. Like, and I don't mean that as a criticism, because you do have this Quicksilver sort of connection of EQ and IQ that's operating and so forth. But I think there is an issue, and when you're sitting in an assessment and reason space, it often is a bit detached. It's an observer. But innovation comes from connecting to how that's going to manifest in the world, not just being the observer. You should not be someone, for instance, who's a journalist writing about innovations that other people come up with. You should be innovating. I mean, it's fine for you to be a writer, but it should be innovative. It shouldn't just be detached on some level. It shouldn't just be, this is all the matrix and I'm just shifting the pieces of the matrix. There is something that you can bring into the field and manifest that is going to be enjoyable for you, but also I think important more generally. So to finish up, let's get a card from the music oracles. And this can be just amusing, it could just be funny, but it could also be profound depending upon what card is drawn and what message Spirit wants to finish with for you. Okay. You've got Hildegard von Bingen. I don't actually know who she is, but she obviously is a nun, or obviously a spiritual person who did music as well. She says, become like a feather on the breath of God. I think you're already kind of like that, to be honest. I think that's really just acknowledging that. And that's part of your brilliance, because you are so Quicksilver. That's the word that keeps coming to me around this. So I think you've already achieved that. She says, gain wisdom through the study of the unknown. I think for you, the unknown is almost you. I think you've spent a lot of your time observing other people, assessing situations, the emotional and intellectual and inspirational sort of energy around you. But I think if you observe yourself and what is unknown in you, you'll start to understand the power that you have. And she says the soul is not in the body is in the soul. So that's interesting. The soul is not in the body is in the soul. So there is a greater purpose for you than just your experience, I think. Your body, your experience, this game that you're so good at is something, but there's something greater than that. And I do think you're meant to do something greater than just enjoy the game. Though, as I say, you're exceptionally good at it. So I hope that resonates for you, Pile 3. I hope that it was enjoyable. If so, please like the video and subscribe. And if you have any comments, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. It's such an interesting energy, such an interesting potential. But beyond that, I hope to see you in future readings. Welcome, Pile 4, to your reading. So something I didn't say deliberately in the introduction was that the choice of tarot deck with the Magician card that brings you to this reading tells me something at an outset about one of your particular types of genius or intelligence. And you chose the Cute and Creepy Tarot, and to me that tarot talks about the genius of inspiration, of fire energy, the wand suit in tarot, of the new, the innovative, the different, the quirky. So there is something in you that is very original. And it's interesting because it does relate to this, but it's almost as though you haven't fully trusted that. And this has been a bit of a theme in quite a few of the readings, in fact, that sometimes the strongest intelligence that comes across, or the most natural one, is one that is almost not trusted as much as what comes through other sources. The interesting thing for you is we've got the Dreams of Gaia tarot up here, and we've got an air card, which is all about learning. So the 3 of air, or 3 of swords in the Dreams of Gaia tarot is not so much about pain, separation, though sometimes in learning there is pain, but it's more geared towards sort of academic learning, schooling and so forth. And here that connects to a sense of time, a sense of time and place, and what is grounded and what is secure with brown, that comes through the mind, through the air element, that helps give bearings. So there is a part of you that is very much in your IQ and in what you've learned at school, college, university, or you may be someone who's a lifelong learner and you really like research and finding the facts about things. They help you find your bearings, because over here is all the sort of cute and creepy tarot, inspiration, that kind of energy and so forth around you, because you have the Child, which in this deck is like the Fool, but is like sort of somebody just starting on something new and different and innovative and starting a journey. And a child in a way needs their bearings, do they not? They need their education. But you're on the way towards wisdom, because what you're bringing through is so strong. You're incredibly alert. You hear things. Actually, I wouldn't mind betting you're clairaudient on a spiritual gift, spiritual intelligence sort of level, or claircognizant, clear knowing. The Child knows a lot more and is closer to wisdom. So you know a lot more and are closer to wisdom than possibly you think. But there is so much new energy and it's coming through so intensely for you, and it processes both through inspiration and through your heart, through your feelings. That's where you want to find your voice. But I think the challenge for you is feeling almost academically, intellectually as comfortable in this space as you should. And in fact, it is, as I say, the core of your genius is your voice. I think for some of you, it's going to be, like what you speak. Some of you, it might be what you sing. Like there's something new that you're singing into being, that you're speaking into being. And that's the Child energy. And you're hearing as well. You're responding to sort of spiritual and emotional sort of nuances. You're very nuanced, much more nuanced than you think you are, much wiser than you think you are. But I think you feel confident when it's processed through your mind, when you can go, okay, this inspiration fits with this particular type of framework, this type of study, I will get the skills to do this, etc. When in fact, I think you have natural skills, but as I say, it's like the inspiration comes through, and that's why you chose the cute and creepy tarot. I think it is really what drives your genius, but you process it through your mind. So your heart and your inspiration is processed through your mind, because to you, it's the combination of the two that is the getting of wisdom, and it gives you your bearings, and it makes you feel that you're hearing things correctly, that you're not getting the wrong information. And you do allow the time. So there is a genius in that. You don't rush too much, because this energy with all this feeling and all this sort of scarlet intensity and the voice wanting to speak, you could do it prematurely, but I don't think you will, because I think that you understand the value. It's getting that in balance. It's making sure that you don't overvalue that side. So let's have a look at what Spirit wants to tell you about your particular types of intelligence right now, pile 4. Okay, so firstly, it's interesting we've got the Hermit, because that's effectively the wisdom card. It is saying to me that you are further along the pathway towards wisdom than possibly you give yourself credit for. You love wisdom, actually, and you do love to some degree the sort of solitude of spiritual contemplation and so forth as well. I am getting, for some of you, it may be also that via a love relationship, that will come to a new level. It will maybe waken more of this up and make you less about the theory and more about the direct inspiration. That's fairly specific, but it'll be coming for some of you. But I think for many of you, you have a deep love for spiritual things and for, as I say, the getting of wisdom. That's why you will always process things, I think, primarily through your mind, even though we don't have kind of swords energy there. It's still, that's the way that you think is time-honoured. It's a time-honoured tradition in some way. Even in your spirituality, you're likely to follow some form of tradition, I think. It doesn't have to be one of the big 3 traditional religions. It could be a traditional practice like Reiki or Buddhism or something like that. It could be anything. But I feel like you will follow a certain pathway that you feel has been secured through time, and that gives you your bearings to deal with all this energy that's coming through for you. You don't know yet what you want to manifest. It is saying that on a material level, on a kind of career level, you haven't worked that out yet. You haven't worked out what would be what you really wanted. Even if you're well advanced in your career, it's like you've kind of got by on being very good at whatever you did from a kind of academic or theoretic or framework sort of level, and having good inspiration, but you haven't connected it to something that would be of real importance to you in manifesting. And that to some degree is muting your strength. There is earth here, so you do have practical intelligence, you do have it. It's just that it's not something that you're focusing that more on your intellect, like proving your intellect, than what you actually want to create. It's like you haven't, even though you've got all this inspiration, you haven't decided what you want to do with it yet. You are very emotionally developed, in fact, more than you think. And if you go, this is a clue for you. Pile 4, if you go through your emotions, the Cancer I feel, the Queen of Cups, so that's Cancer energy, it's also Scorpio energy. If you go into that sort of side of things, then that takes you, I think, closer to the wisdom, and it takes you a little bit out of your head, because I think you do rely on your head. You're very smart, as I say, but and so you've got high IQ, but it can become a bit of a crutch when all this other energy, your inspirational, spiritual energy, is where your real genius is, if you allow it to come through, and you work out what you want to manifest with it. So let's ask Spirit for a little bit more advice for you about how to do that. Okay, so Spirit is saying, I think Spirit is saying that regardless of the fact, as I say, you are very inspirational, very spiritual, very inspirational, and your emotional intelligence is fine. You are someone who is naturally more connected to how you would voice it, I think, and how you would think about it. So the Hermit likes meditation. I think that's just sort of saying that a lot of inspiration will come to you through meditative times, taking time out. But then you need to use the inspiration and bring it into kind of some sort of balance that you feel is just and reasonable, and which fits with the intellectual framework. So you're always going to use your IQ as your North Star, and that's not a problem, but and it is the way ultimately to help you decide that. But I do think that Spirit is saying on another level, and particularly through the meditation, try and also get into your heart, because it's like that is really well developed. You're very good with people. For all that you might think you're a bit shy and a loner, you're actually really acute around people, because you kind of almost allow them the same innocence and the same exploration you have yourself. But maybe you're not really seeing that, but it's fine. It's fine if you want to process everything through the intellect. And I think Spirit is saying that's what you're going to do, and there's actually not a problem with it. But you do need to use it to be a bit quirky and original and define what it is that you want. Even if it's, in fact, what I'm getting is that you need to define something that is yours in the space of whatever this intellectual piece is, something that is uniquely you, because you do have the inspiration, and the Knight of Swords sometimes does things that surprise people. So I think that's the key, but you won't ultimately do that and show your genius till you've decided what it is that you want to manifest. So let's have a look at some of those sorts of energies. Let's have a first look at career and sort of material type of energy around your type of genius. So I'm using firstly the business class tarot because it has tarot that's connected to career energies. Then also, okay. And this says change, the heart code oracles there for career, and a career and money deck. So this is very much doubling down on that emotional intelligence. You are very, very emotionally intelligent, more than you give yourself credit for, and a lot of other people see that in you. You know when to shift things when they're not emotionally working. And that may be part of what this thing is that you can bring in. It might be something that can help other people, give them a framework, a structure, a way to find their bearings in emotional situations. You could work in sort of emotional therapeutics in some way or something like that. You'd be very, very good. You'd be a kind of a genius at being able to help people process that stuff. You may do it through writing, which connects to the voice. So some of you, this inspiration may go through a very structured way of doing things, a novel or a non-fiction piece of work that's very structured and precise and gives people their bearings, and it comes from your mind but ultimately is drawn from this emotional acuity you have, and helping yourself and others go through change. There's something about your career may change a number of times as you determine what it is that you want to bring into being, and as you get the wisdom and so forth, or as you get inspired, or it could be that you inspire other people to change, to break old emotional patterns and to be able to do something that works for them. Let's have a look at relationship energy around you. So we have commitment and we have unhappy. So I think this is saying, I do think it's picking up that some of you, part of your genius and your intelligence might be helping people with relationship issues, commitment issues, dealing with when they're unhappy, being able to rise and find things that they are true to. But I also think this is saying that the commitment to what you do is going to come through your heart. Otherwise, you'll be unhappy. Otherwise, if you just live in your intellect, you'll probably do extremely well, but you're not going to be as happy as you would be if you were really following what your emotional pathway was and working out what that meant for you uniquely. Okay, and let's have a look at well-being and spiritual sorts of intelligence around you. So around lifestyle, we have transparency. Around well-being, we have autoimmune. And around spiritual, we have mediumship. Okay, so mediumship doesn't surprise me in a way with the very strong hermit energy. You do have a very strong connection to others, maybe even relationships and emotional issues from ancestors and loved ones in the past. So that connection to spirit and to what needs to be, transformed and transmuted and so forth is part of the alchemy of bringing all this together. There is something, I think one of the reasons that you like, I think this was what this is telling us, one of the reasons that you like the intellectual thing is it helps you to be transparent. It helps you to explain and voice why you do things. What I do think though is you misunderstand and you underestimate how much people can see your emotional authenticity anyway. But I think you've almost got it as a kind of a touchstone and an ethical principle that you want to be transparent, you want to be honest, you want to be clear. Autoimmune coming up is interesting. That's when the body's own defences turn against themselves. So I'm wondering whether Spirit is just trying to say that when you don't acknowledge all these things, you could potentially be turning against your own sort of like strength. So the autoimmune system, so don't use one particularly strong part of your system and your autoimmune system to dampen down the rest. Keep the things in balance. Okay, so to finish off, I want to use some affirmations, some energy levels, and then also a card from the music oracles, because I think music is a sort of a great distillation of all the different types of intelligence. So firstly, a couple of affirmations for you, Pile 4. Okay, that's interesting. That one came up, and another one you might have gone to a couple, potentially. Some of you might have, or some might have come from there. So you've always been happy, you only need to remember. So that's interesting with the child and then through to the sort of the wise one, so to speak. There is sort of something in the patterns of your life and getting back to that sort of innocence and that inspirational joy and those feelings that are really positive. Just remembering that rather than just living in your head. And shine your light, especially when it's dark. I do think that many of you are going to do something that helps other people deal with emotional issues in some sort of structured way that makes sense, that is scientifically or psychologically rigorous in some way. Okay, let's see what the wisdom of the Sacred Bee Oracle has to suggest to you. Scarcity and anguish. Okay. So that might be giving a little bit more of a clue as to when you might go more into your head and less into the inspirational thing. If you feel scarcity, then that will cause a kind of an anguish where you go back to your head and to your theories and to your problem solving and finding your bearings. This may also be picking up that Page of Pentacles reversed. For some of you, there may be some financial issues around you at the moment, or you may at various stages in your life find that you get stuck on a material level when you're not really listening to that inspirational side. So I think it would be coming up to say that scarcity is a sign of kind of almost mental anguish where you haven't tuned in enough to your emotional and inspirational power and energy and so forth. Because remember, with the cute and creepy tarot, your real genius is in what is new and different about you. So if you are feeling the scarcity then and that inspiration isn't coming through, it may be because you're sitting too much in the theories and frameworks of others. So to finish off pile 4, we're going to pull a card from the music oracles. This can be just amusing sometimes, depending upon what icon we get. Sometimes it can be quite profound. So take from it what works for you, leave the rest. Okay, we've got Marvin Gaye. Okay, so, well, he was certainly somebody who was very emotionally resonant, had an amazing voice for change and for helping other people politically, socially, all those sorts of things. So that makes perfect sense. Plus, the precision of his music, had an intellectual side to it as well, I think. So that's a really interesting icon to come up for you. He says, don't fool around with something you cherish. So there is, yes, your heart, go into your heart and into your inspiration. Don't mess with that, and don't try and force it into an intellectual structure. He says there is madness in love, but also reason in madness. Now that's interesting, because you will be able to find your bearings. And this is one of your points of genius. And this is why you can help other people with the inspiration and the emotional intelligence that you have to help other people find the reason in what seems to be mad. There is definitely something there for many of the people who've come here. And then lastly, a selfless heart is all you need to get by. Well, I believe you have that. I believe you are very much from your heart, and people can see that. And your journey is about wisdom, and wisdom ultimately is about being the selfless person who really brings all their skills to bear for their own good and for the good of others, which I think you will do very much so. So, Papa, I hope that was enjoyable, and I hope it gave you an idea of your special types of intelligence and genius and some ideas about what to do with it. I hope you enjoyed the reading, and if you have any comments, I'd love to hear about in the comments. Otherwise, I hope to see you in future readings.